The warm rays of the afternoon sun filtered through the narrow windows of the small study room, where Amina sat with her books spread wide across the wooden table. Her curiosity had been stirred by the approaching days of Eid-ul-Adha. Though she had celebrated it every year with her family since childhood, she realized that much of her understanding was limited to outward traditions, the new clothes, the cheerful gatherings, and the sacrifice of animals that followed the special prayer. Something inside her urged her to go beyond the surface and discover the deeper meaning that gave this festival its place in the heart of Muslims across the world. She closed her notebook for a moment and leaned back on her chair, allowing her mind to wander. What exactly did Eid-ul-Adha stand for? What was the story behind it? Why did millions of families every year perform the sacrifice with such devotion? She knew the simple answer often repeated to children. It was to honor Prophet Ibrahim's willingness to sacrifice his son when commanded by God. But Amina felt that this explanation, though correct, did not carry the full weight of the event. She wanted to feel the truth of the story, to step into the world of Ibrahim, and to understand why his test was remembered for thousands of years. That evening, after the Maghrib prayer, she approached her father in the living room. He was reading quietly, his glasses perched low on his nose, and the soft yellow lamp illuminating the pages of a thick book. Amina sat beside him and spoke gently. "Father, can you tell me the real story of Eid-ul-Adha? I know about the sacrifice, but I feel there is more to it." Her father looked at her with a thoughtful smile. "My dear, you are right. There is much more to Eid-ul-Adha than the act of sacrifice. It is a story that embodies faith, trust, and the true meaning of submission to God. Let me take you back to the time of Prophet Ibrahim. Peace be upon him." Amina listened intently as her father began to narrate. Ibrahim was a man chosen by God, known for his unshakable faith. Throughout his life he faced many tests, each one greater than the last. He was commanded to leave his homeland, to live in strange lands, and to trust that God's wisdom would always guide him. One of the greatest tests came in the form of his beloved son. Her father paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. Ibrahim had prayed for years to have a child. When finally blessed with a son, Ismail, his joy knew no bounds. But then came the command from God. In a dream, Ibrahim saw that he was sacrificing his son. Dreams of prophets are not ordinary dreams. They are revelations and must be followed. Imagine the weight of such a command. The very son he had longed for, the boy who had filled his life with happiness, was now to be given up for the sake of God. Amina's eyes widened as she tried to picture the scene. Her heart ached at the thought of such a trial. "What did Ibrahim do?" she asked softly. Her father smiled with quiet admiration. "He submitted. That is the essence of his story. He went to his son Ismail and shared the dream with him. And here is the remarkable part. Instead of resisting or questioning, young Ismail said, 'Father, do as you are commanded. You will find me, if Allah wills, among the patient.'" Their hearts were filled with trust. This was not a blind act of cruelty, but a demonstration of complete obedience to the Creator who knows best. Amina felt goosebumps rise on her arms. She could almost see Ibrahim walking with his son, both filled with courage and faith. Her father continued, "When Ibrahim laid his son down and was ready to sacrifice him, God intervened. A ram was sent in place of Ismail. This was a sign that the test had been fulfilled. Ibrahim's willingness and Ismail's patience were enough. The sacrifice of animals we perform today is in remembrance of that great act of faith." The living room fell silent. The story had settled deeply into Amina's heart. She whispered, "So Eid-ul-Adha is really about faith and submission, not just the sacrifice." Her father nodded. "Exactly. It teaches us that true devotion lies in surrendering to God's will, even when the command seems beyond our understanding. The sacrifice we perform is symbolic. It reminds us to let go of our attachments and to place God above all else." That night, as Amina lay in bed, she thought about the story again and again. She understood now that Eid-ul-Adha was not simply about meat distribution or festive meals. It was about the willingness to give up what we love most for the sake of God. She realized that in every person's life, there are moments where they must choose between their desires and their faith. The next morning, Amina decided to write in her journal. She wrote about Ibrahim's courage, about Ismail's patience, and about the mercy of God who replaced the sacrifice with a ram. She reflected on how every year, when her father selected an animal for Eid, it was not just a tradition, but a reenactment of history. The act was a reminder of the values Muslims must carry: faith, trust, and the readiness to sacrifice for what is right. Later that week, the atmosphere in her town began to change as Eid al-Adha drew near. Markets filled with families choosing animals for sacrifice. Sheep, goats, and cows lined the stalls, their owners proudly showing their health and strength. The air buzzed with conversations, bargaining, and laughter. For many children, it was the most exciting time of the year, but for Amina, this time it carried a new depth. She walked beside her father in the marketplace, watching the animals not only as creatures to be bought, but as symbols of the great story she had just learned. Her father pointed to a strong white goat and discussed the price with the seller. As they waited, Amina observed an elderly man nearby choosing a sheep with his young grandson. She overheard the boy asking, "Grandfather, why do we do this every year?" The old man knelt down and said gently, "We do it to remember Ibrahim and Ismail, and to show Allah that we are grateful for His mercy." The boy's eyes lit up with understanding. Amina smiled to herself, realizing how the story continued to live in the hearts of people across generations. Back at home, her mother prepared the house for the coming guests. Curtains were washed, cushions fluffed, and sweet dishes planned. The scent of spices filled the air as pots of food simmered in the kitchen. It was not only about sacrifice, but also about community and sharing. The meat from the sacrificed animal would be divided into 3 portions: one for the family, one for relatives and friends, and one for the poor and needy. Amina's mother reminded her that this act of sharing was an essential part of the celebration. That evening, as the family gathered around the dinner table, Amina shared what she had learned. She spoke passionately about Ibrahim's test and how Eid al-Adha was more than just a festival of food. Her younger brother listened with wide eyes, asking questions about the story. Her mother nodded in approval, happy to see her daughter reflecting so deeply. When Amina finally stepped outside under the starry night sky, she felt a sense of peace. The story of Eid al-Adha had unfolded before her like a guiding light. It was no longer just a holiday marked by customs. It was a timeless reminder of faith, patience, and mercy. She whispered a small prayer, asking God to help her carry the lesson of Ibrahim and Ismail in her own life. And so, with the days of Eid approaching, Amina found herself not only preparing outwardly for the festival, but also preparing inwardly. She felt ready to celebrate with new meaning in her heart, to see the sacrifice not as an end in itself, but as a door to deeper understanding. She knew that this was only the beginning of her journey to truly grasp the powerful story behind the Muslim sacrifice. The morning of Eid al-Adha finally arrived. The sound of the call to prayer echoed beautifully across the neighborhood, weaving through the early air like a reminder of unity and devotion. Amina woke before dawn, her heart filled with both excitement and reflection. She put on her new dress, carefully chosen days before, and helped her mother prepare breakfast for the family. The house glowed with joy as laughter and greetings filled the rooms. After eating lightly, Amina joined her father and brother as they walked to the mosque for the special Eid prayer. Crowds of people dressed in fresh clothes streamed through the streets, heading in the same direction. The spirit of togetherness was unmistakable. Strangers exchanged smiles, neighbors greeted each other warmly, and children skipped ahead with wide grins. It was as if the entire town had become one family united by faith. The prayer field was filled with rows upon rows of worshippers. The Imam delivered a sermon after the prayer, reminding everyone of the significance of the day. He spoke about Prophet Ibrahim's trust in God, about Ismail's patience, and about the mercy shown when a ram was sent in place of the child. His words carried deep meaning, urging people not to limit the sacrifice to animals alone, but to reflect on their own lives. The Imam explained that true sacrifice meant letting go of arrogance, greed, and selfishness, while striving to become closer to God through kindness, humility, and generosity. Amina listened closely, her heart stirred by every word. She thought about her own life. What could she sacrifice for God? What attachments held her back? Could she give up anger when wronged? She put aside laziness when it came to prayer? The Imam's reminder made her realize that Eid al-Adha was not only about one story in history, but about a lesson that every believer had to live each day. When the sermon ended, the congregation exchanged embraces. Men shook hands, children hugged one another, and women greeted each other with warmth and affection. The atmosphere was alive with joy, yet grounded in reverence. Amina felt the beauty of belonging to something larger than herself, a community of people striving toward the same truth. Back at home, preparations for the sacrifice were underway. Her father had arranged for the goat they bought in the market to be brought to the courtyard. The animal stood calmly, unaware of the role it was about to play in a tradition centuries old. Amina approached slowly, stroking its soft white fur. She whispered a silent prayer, thanking God for the blessing of being able to perform the sacrifice. Her father gathered the family around. Before beginning, he raised his hands and recited the prayer of intention. His voice was steady yet filled with emotion. He reminded the children that this act was not about blood or meat, but about remembering Ibrahim's willingness to give up what he loved most for the sake of God. Then, with careful respect, the sacrifice was completed. A sense of solemnity filled the courtyard for a moment, followed by relief and gratitude. Inbina's mother quickly began preparing the meat for distribution. Following tradition, 1/3 would stay with the family, 1/3 would go to relatives and friends, and 1/3 would be given to the poor. This division was a reminder that faith must always be accompanied by generosity and care for others. Later that afternoon, Amina accompanied her father to deliver portions of the meat to neighbors. The streets bustled with activity as families did the same, carrying trays wrapped neatly in cloth. Each exchange was filled with cheerful greetings of Eid Mubarak. What struck Amina most was the sight of her father visiting homes of those less fortunate with the same warmth he showed to close relatives. She realized how this day removed barriers between rich and poor, reminding everyone that before God, all were equal. At one house, an elderly widow opened the door. Her eyes brightened as Amina's father handed her a portion of meat. "May Allah bless you," she whispered, her voice trembling with gratitude. Amina felt her chest tighten with emotion. She understood that this was the true spirit of Eid al-Adha, bringing happiness to others, lightening their burdens, and ensuring that no one was left behind. By evening, the family home buzzed with guests. Cousins, uncles, aunts, and neighbors filled the rooms. The aroma of freshly cooked dishes spread through the air. Children played noisily in the yard, while the adults exchanged stories and laughter inside. Amina helped her mother serve trays of food, moving swiftly between the kitchen and the guests. Despite the busy atmosphere, she felt a sense of peace. Every smile she saw, every word of gratitude she heard, reminded her of the blessings that came with sharing. As the night drew closer, Amina stepped outside for a moment of quiet. The moon hung high in the sky, shining gently over the rooftops. She thought again about Ibrahim and Ismail. Their story had taken place thousands of years ago, yet here she was, living in its shadow, drawing lessons from their faith. She understood now why Muslims all over the world cherish this day. It was not only a reminder of history, but a chance to renew faith, to strengthen family bonds, and to extend compassion to the wider community. When she returned inside, she found her younger brother sitting quietly, his plate half full. "What are you thinking about?" she asked him kindly. He looked up and said, "I was wondering why we give away so much of the meat when we could keep it all for ourselves." Amina smiled and placed her hand on his shoulder. "Because," she explained, "Eid al-Adha teaches us that what we give away is more valuable than what we keep. Sharing with others brings blessings that no amount of food could equal." Her brother nodded slowly, as if the words had planted a seed in his heart. That night, after the guests had left and the house had grown quiet, Amina returned to her journal. She wrote about the prayer in the open field, the sermon of the imam, the sacrifice in the courtyard, and the faces of those who received meat with gratitude. She filled page after page with her reflections, feeling that her understanding of Eid al-Adha had grown far beyond what she had imagined. She ended her writing with a simple thought: the sacrifice of Eid is not only with animals, but with our own hearts. Every day we're asked to sacrifice pride for humility, selfishness for generosity, and doubt for faith. That is the powerful story behind the Muslim sacrifice. A story that began with Ibrahim and Ismail, but continues in each of us today. With that final reflection, Amina closed her journal and placed it beside her bed. The house was quiet now, and sleep soon overtook her. But in her dreams she felt a lightness in her heart, as though she had stepped closer to the essence of faith itself. The days following the first sacrifice of Eid al-Adha were filled with movement, laughter, and the sound of families coming together. Amina woke up each morning to the aroma of fresh dishes being cooked in her mother's kitchen. Neighbors knocked at the door carrying portions of their own sacrifices, exchanging greetings and warm smiles. The atmosphere in the entire town felt like a festival of faith and community. Yet for Amina, these days carried a deeper meaning than ever before. She had seen with her own eyes how the act of sacrifice was tied to kindness and sharing. Each time her father distributed meat to a family in need, she saw gratitude light up their faces. Each time her mother prepared a tray for a neighbor, she felt the bond of compassion growing stronger. For Amina, this was no longer just a holiday. It was a living reminder of the values that had been taught through the story of Prophet Ibrahim. One afternoon, Amina and her younger brother went to visit their grandmother, who lived in a small house on the edge of the town. Her grandmother's garden was filled with flowers blooming in the sunlight, and the fragrance of mint and jasmine drifted in the air. They sat together under the shade of a tree while their grandmother told them stories from the Quran and the lives of the prophets. "Grandmother," Amina asked curiously, "why do people say that sacrifice is more about the heart than the animal itself?" Her grandmother smiled softly, her wrinkled hands resting on her lap. "Because, my dear, God does not need the meat or the blood. He looks at our intention and our faith. When Ibrahim was willing to sacrifice his beloved son, it was his obedience and trust that mattered most. The animal is only a symbol, reminding us to purify our hearts." Her brother leaned forward, his eyes wide. "So if I give up my favorite toy for someone else, is that also a sacrifice?" Their grandmother nodded with a chuckle. "Yes, my child. Sacrifice comes in many forms. Sometimes it is giving up something you love. Sometimes it is giving up your pride. And sometimes it is giving up your anger. All of it brings you closer to God." Amina felt her heart swell with understanding. She realized that the story of Ibrahim was not distant history. It was a message alive in every act of selflessness, in every choice to put faith above desire. The next day, her father took her to a nearby village where families lived with fewer means. They carried portions of meat, rice, and bread to share with those who had little. As they entered the village, children ran barefoot through the streets, their laughter mixing with the sound of women greeting them warmly. Amina watched as her father handed food to families who welcomed it with joy and relief. One old man held her father's hand tightly and said, "You have reminded us that we are not forgotten. May Allah bless your family." On their way home, Amina felt quiet. Her father noticed her thoughtful expression. "What are you thinking about, my daughter?" She looked up at him and replied, "I am thinking that sacrifice is not only giving to God, but also giving to His people." Her father nodded with pride. "You have understood it well. When we care for others, we are showing gratitude to God for what He has given us." That evening, Amina wrote in her journal again. She described the children of the village, the thankful faces of their parents, and the peace that filled her heart as she walked beside her father. She wrote, "Eid al-Adha teaches us that sacrifice connects us not only to God, but also to people. It makes us realize that what we have is not only ours. It is a trust that must be shared." The following day, Amina's school organized a small gathering where students were encouraged to share their experiences of Eid. One by one, children spoke about their new clothes, the food they enjoyed, and the animals their families had sacrificed. When it was Amina's turn, she stood up nervously but spoke with honesty. She told them about Prophet Ibrahim's test, about Ismail's patience, and about how sacrifice was more than just meat. She explained that it was about purifying the heart and helping those in need. Her classmates listened quietly, some nodding in agreement. When she finished, her teacher smiled and said, "Thank you, Amina. You have reminded us of the true spirit of Eid." That night, her mother hugged her proudly. "You spoke with courage today," she said. Amina felt shy but happy. She knew that she had taken another step in living the lesson of Eid al-Adha, not only learning it, but also sharing it with others. As the days went on, the excitement of Eid began to fade in the town. Yet its teachings remained strong in Amina's heart. She no longer saw sacrifice as a single event, but as a way of life. Every day brought a chance to live like Ibrahim and Ismail, trusting, patient, and willing to place God above everything else. The weeks after Eid al-Adha slowly unfolded into ordinary days. Yet Amina carried within her heart a new understanding that made those days extraordinary. The story of Prophet Ibrahim and his son Ismail was no longer just a tale she had heard in her childhood. It had become a living lesson, shaping her thoughts and guiding her actions in quiet ways. Each evening she found time to sit by her window with her journal open. Her entries no longer focused only on the events of Eid, but on the choices she was making in her daily life. When she helped her mother with chores without being asked, she wrote about how small sacrifices built patience. When she gave her share of sweets to her younger brother, she recorded how letting go of her own desire brought him happiness. In every act, she saw a reflection of the faith Ibrahim had shown. One afternoon, her father gathered the family in the courtyard to speak. His voice carried both warmth and firmness as he reminded them that Eid al-Adha was not meant to be remembered for only a few days each year. He said, "The real meaning of sacrifice is to keep it alive in our hearts. Every time we put God before our desires, every time we give to others before keeping for ourselves, we are honoring the lesson of Ibrahim and Ismail." Amina listened closely. His words filled her with determination. She wanted to live every day as though it was connected to that story of faith. Her mother added gently, "Sacrifice is not always something grand. Sometimes it is found in patience with one another, sometimes in forgiveness, and sometimes in speaking kind words when silence feels easier." The following week, Amina faced a test of her own. At school, one of her classmates accused her unfairly of spoiling a project. She felt her heart burn with anger and the urge to defend herself harshly. But then she remembered her father's words and her grandmother's wisdom. She took a deep breath, calmed her voice, and explained the truth without anger. Though her classmate refused to apologize, Amina felt peace in her heart. That evening she wrote in her journal, "Today I gave up my anger for the sake of God. It was not easy, but I feel stronger." Her younger brother, too, was growing under the lessons of Eid. One evening he proudly told her that he had given his favorite toy to a friend who had none. He beamed as he explained, "It felt hard at first, but then I remembered what grandmother said." Amina hugged him with pride. She realized that the story of Ibrahim was living not only in her heart, but also in her brother's. As the months moved on, the excitement of Eid faded from the streets, but its spirit continued in the quiet sacrifices of everyday life. Amina saw her father give charity without seeking recognition. She saw her mother forgive a neighbor who had once spoken harshly. She saw herself and her brother learning to put kindness above pride. Each of these moments became a thread in a larger fabric of faith that stretched far beyond the days of celebration. One evening, their teacher at school announced that students would prepare short presentations about lessons they had learned recently. When it was Amina's turn, she stood before her classmates and spoke clearly. She told them about the story of Ibrahim and Ismail, about the sacrifice of Eid, and about how its meaning was not only about animals, but about hearts. She said, "True sacrifice is giving up what we love most for the sake of what is right. It is patience, forgiveness, and trust in God." The room grew silent as her words settled, and then her teacher said with a smile, "That is a lesson for all of us." That night, Amina's parents praised her for her courage. Her mother kissed her forehead and said, "You are carrying the story forward." This is how faith lives on, when we share it with others. Amina felt her chest warm with joy. She knew now that the powerful story behind the Muslim sacrifice was not locked in history. It was alive in every person willing to live with faith and obedience. As the year slowly moved toward another season, Amina looked forward to the next Eid-ul-Adha with a heart ready for deeper understanding. She knew the celebration would bring new clothes, family gatherings, and the sacrifice of animals, but more than that, it would bring another chance to renew her faith. She whispered a prayer as she closed her journal one night, asking God to guide her steps as he had guided Ibrahim and Ismail. Under the stars, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. The lessons of Eid-ul-Adha would remain with her for life, reminding her that sacrifice was not about losing, but about gaining closeness to God. The story that began thousands of years ago had found a new home in her heart, and she was determined to live by it every day.